But let's quickly segue into something else that has become very problematic, and it has to do with the national security situation. In recent weeks, I think from the 11th day of this month, we had the sour incident that happened with Caleb Kuda, journalist with City FM, City TV. I'll start with you, Ahunka Lindsay. What is your quick reaction so far to the handling of the investigation? Now, this is the first time that we've had really, I mean, in a long time, the national security apparatus owning up in any way to say that, well, we feel some things were not done in the right way. But at the same time, we have a situation where national security is investigating itself, and we have a situation where, well, the secondment of Lieutenant Colonel Ajiman has been reversed, but we also have some officers, 3 of them, who are faceless. We do not know who they are. We do not know what punitive measures will follow. What is your quick reaction to this box of issues so far when it comes to the national security problem?
Well, I think, first of all, let me start by saying it's clear from the National Security Minister's statement that something happened to Caleb that was untoward. And in the society that we want to live in, that is just not acceptable in any form or manner. So let's just be clear on that. And for me, a couple of things are very important. First of all, I don't remember ever a national security minister issuing a statement as a result of something like this happening, not just to journalists, but to anybody. And the people being, and the statement is actually quite clear, and I think this is something we need to spend a little time on. States that you are being returned back to your original, your home, so to say, for them to process and investigate a little further. So I think that is a big plus. The second area, which I think is very important, is that we should also remember, and it's actually very interesting, I listened very carefully to all the dialogue of what had happened on that day, that it was actually somebody within the national security apparatus that ensured that both Caleb and the young lady, who was the other reporter, went back.
When you say went back?
Went back to City FM. If you recall, if you listen to Mr. Samen's account, he made it quite clear that he appealed to somebody within, I don't want to get into names, but somebody within that said, no, this, let me talk. And in fact, he was one of the key reasons why things went through. The reason why I said that is that, you know, if you harvest an orange, a whole orange, and 5 or 6 of them are bad, you don't throw all of the orange out. Because national security is there for all of us. Their role is very important, especially in the environment we're living in today. Just take a look at our region and find out what happened yesterday in Mali and other places. They play a very important role, and it's important that we hold them to account. The subsequent letter that came out, and I think everybody expected this to be business as usual. Nobody would say anything, but then, you know, the Honorable Kandapa came out, made a statement, moved them. Now where we're sitting, and I think it's rightfully so, everybody wants to know, so what is now happening? And I think it's appropriate that question is asked. But in asking that question, I think what we need to be a little careful of is not to jump to the same conclusions that we jumped to when we said national security would never respond to anything in where they are. So for me, first of all, the whole episode is something that we don't want in our society, period. Not just for journalists, but for anybody. Some of us have had experiences on this thing in terms of where it is. My father went to jail first in '66, and until he died 2 years ago, the death sentence which was put on him in 1981 was never withdrawn. So we've been through this situation. We don't want any of that kind of environment in our situation. We need to trust those institutions. And the other point I want to quickly say is that, to me, this will be a test of how it is we have evolved over the years in dealing with problems. And I think it's important we look at that. So what happened when the allegation was made? Was it listened to? Did people respond to them? When X, what happened? What then happened? Was there punitive action? We're just talking about drivers. I'm not getting away sometimes with something they shouldn't be. So I think this will be a good way for us all to look at it and judge based on the actions, whether or not lessons have been learned, to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
A very quick one. Do you feel the national security apparatus or setup investigating itself is something that ought to be looked at?
Well, every institution, whenever there's a problem, whether it's a police, whether it's even an organization, company, has a responsibility to investigate. But I don't believe this is the only thing that I do remember the National Media Commission is also doing investigation. Isn't that correct? And there's a couple of others that are also engaged. So I believe that the national security and especially the army and the police will have a role to play in investigating as per their own mandate. But we also have the NMC, which has a very important role, and particularly in terms of what it does for the Media Commission, to also investigate. And it will be difficult for us to get to a judgment if we don't see the results of those investigations and whether or not those things are actually, whatever their recommendations are executed or implemented. And so I don't have an issue with institutions investigating, as long as the entity that is also charged with also making sure, like the NMC, in this case the NMC, it could have been Yoko, it could have been Shraj, there could have been other entities, but the NMC is the appropriate entity that has also been charged. And we look forward to seeing what their results will come in. But I don't think there is a problem with national security having an investigation.
Right.
I mean, that is appropriate. Even if you had an issue here in your group here, you have relationship laws, you have your HR policies that says that you have a fair hearing within it. Before you start looking outside, you have to also look within. So I don't have a challenge with that.
So as far as you're concerned, nothing wrong with national security, the ministry investigating itself, but at least you're hoping to see what happens with the NMC.
Investigating, as long as the agency that is charged with whoever has been wronged, in inverted commas, allegedly wronged, also is doing its role.
Okay.
To me, that is part and parcel of the process.
I'll return to you, Lawyer Dawudu, shortly, but let me also announce that we've been joined by Adam Bona, a security analyst. Mr. Bona, let me just say a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Thank you. Good morning to your panelists. Good morning.
Great. Good morning. And I'll just beg of you to hold on for me just briefly as I get the take of Lawyer Kojoga Adawudu, because I wanted to at least flow from what we've started discussing. So what is your reaction on the same matter in terms of national security and initiating an investigation into something that happened within the body, the three faceless officers, and then we'll get down to Lieutenant Colonel Ajiman subsequently. But what is your quick reaction?
Yeah, quick reaction is that I don't think that the national security can be a judge in their own cause, that they are investigating themselves. What I will agree with Honorable Ahunkanlisi is that if it's a disciplinary action that is being taken within the setup, yes, it's allowed that you give fair hearing to all of them, you set up a body. But that is different from investigating. When you're investigating, you allow other people to come in to investigate, independent people. But if it's a disciplinary action within the setup, I agree with him that everybody must be given a fair hearing. They must listen to all the parties, what actually happened. And I think that is the process that has been kicked in. But when you want to investigate and your officers who are, alleged or have been complicit in the matter, how do you investigate yourself? That is why I believe that with the disciplinary actions that have been taken, that is why they have allowed Lieutenant Ajiman to return back to the military, back to barracks. The other faceless police people, we've been told that they should also get back to the Ghana Police Service to be reassigned. I see, yes, it's a good step that we have heard from the minister, but I see that's one step forward, 3 steps back.
How so?
Yes, 3 steps back because he said we'll come back to Lieutenant Ajiman. Because, listen, it's alleged, and I'm yet to find out to authenticate the letter. The day that the report came and he was asked to go back to barracks, that was the day he was promoted. He was made a commander of a unit.
But this is an office that, per the information we're getting, he was commander of the 64 Infantry Regiment before he was seconded to national security. So he's merely been sent back. Of course, you can call it a promotion if he's not, well, per your definition, depending on how you see it, maybe you think that's not punitive, but he was commander before he was seconded. That point must be made clear.
Yes, yes. If he was commander, and there is a reason why he's been brought back, I'm sure when he left, there was a commander.
So you feel
there would never be a vacuum. So why do you take that commander out and bring him back as a commander?
Okay.
When really it is to say that what you have done is not in tune with the mores of society. You know, you must be remorseful, you must be reflective and sober to see what had happened. But if the same institution is saying that, no, we will still put you at a pedestal, that gives you that influence, the command. Because it is to take that out, that you don't have that influence again, that you will go and reflect. But that's not what, it's a slap in the face.
Okay, you call it a slap in the face. I'll give you more time to discuss that, not only Lieutenant Colonel Ajiman, but even DSP Azugu and the entire situation surrounding him. But let me bring in Adam Bona now. Thank you so much, sir, for staying with us. Now, I've heard you speak very forcefully about this entire incident to do with City FM journalists Caleb Kuda and Zoe Abu Beido. What had happened to them? We followed the sequence of events. What is your quick take on, first of all, how far we've come in terms of the process, the investigation, what the NMC has been saying, and then we'll quickly segue into something you've said a lot about, the Lieutenant Colonel Ajiman situation. So what's your brief take on how far we've come in terms of the investigation?
Well, good morning once again. My brief take on these investigations, I would say that, well, there's nothing wrong if the national security decides to trigger their own internal investigations process to ensure that they are well aware of, what took place, the officers involved and all that, and probably reporting back to the rest of Ghanaians. There is nothing wrong. At least this probably marks probably a shift from the status quo, where we usually would have that form of opacity, where you have some of these institutions that behave like a cult. If you are not in there, you don't get any information, and the way and manner they probably work. And so I would say, well, it's a shift from what we know, and I am believing that this particular action by the national security should be commended in terms of beginning to speak to us in the manner they did. The other aspect has to do with probably not giving us the entire picture, because if you listen to the victims who were brutalized, I mean your colleagues Caleb and Zoe Abu Beido, they mentioned several other people who were involved. But unfortunately, the report was silent. They didn't mention them. And so to speak, you would say Lieutenant Colonel Ajiman, strangely, he's the only one whose name was mentioned in this particular report. I find that very strange. Either, someone is up to something, there could be a cover-up, I don't know, because you and I know that anyone who understands military and security operations, even though Colonel Ajiman his secondment would have been withdrawn, and we are hearing it's alleged that he's been sent to head the elite unit of the military, which is the 64 Infantry Unit. I would say that with regards to his international ratings, he's been damaged so much. With regards to even if it happens that he's going to head the elite units, it will be very difficult. You know that if you are a coach, your players play for you. First of all, they must play for you to win. And when you win, eventually everybody, owners of the football team, the supporters would all get to enjoy. But mine is that looking at it, how is he going to lead an elite team like this with his name battered? And so there are more questions to be asked of the national security.
If I may, he has led that team before, and the matter is still being investigated. Is it not only fair that if we are returning him to post where he came from, we return him to where he was before? I mean, that is an argument that has been made.
Well, I don't think so, because first of all, he has been indicted by the national security itself. I have heard that it is a promotion. I beg to differ. It is not a promotion. Either it's at the same level or probably even lower, because obviously if he was a director of national security operations and they were supposed to go co-opt the 64 infantry to come and work with them, the 64 infantry and the CEO, the then CEO, who I know is actually the reason why we have this situation is because he's going on some form of study leave. He's going on some for further studies. And so I think it's the reason why it is speculated everywhere that by the military high command would have to come out and confirm or deny. But the truth is that at the level he was at the national security, it meant that all other officers who were co-opted to come and work with the operational wing of the national security will be under his instructions. And so mine is that, first of all, he has been indicted. His name hasn't been cleared. So you tell me you are going to deploy him with combatants. These elite units are just combatant specialized in diffusing, getting into hostage situation, getting into a lot of, anyone who knows the way these people are trained will tell you that you need his fighters, call them, these are soldiers, to believe 100% in him and would want to die for him. Before he was seconded to the national security, he's been there not quite long. There was Colonel Opoku or so who left, who served his term and left before he came. He hasn't been there long enough. And so mine is that if he was there, he was the CEO for 64 and brought to national security, and his name indicted, he's, battered, and you send him there. Tell me if you at, what's the name? Multimedia, if your producer who used to produce you is moved to radio, and then you hear that he was involved in something, he's been indicted, then all of a sudden they bring him back. Well, you don't have a choice. Mm-hmm. But the truth is that only God will know what will be going on in your mind. And you are talking about soldiers who must have a certain frame of mind, believing that, first of all, if you know the way these people are trained, you take instructions directly from your commanding officer.
So Adam Bona, just to hit the nail on the head here, are you suggesting that he's lost the merit to lead that team? And so basically he can't be at national security. He's been, his secondment has been reversed. But even within the military setup, that regiment that he led, you're saying he doesn't have the moral compass to lead the team anymore until all of this is cleared. Is that what you're saying?
Correct, yes. You can ask any retired, or you can ask the host, you can ask them, even our own, the good old Arnold Quinn, you can ask all these people. It is just one little thing, and it will even be difficult to ask to lead a certain team at the UN level, at the AU level, and probably at the ECOWAS level. So at our level, it will be, he's lost every trust, every moral college standing to be asked to lead such an elite team. I would have thought that whilst the investigations were ongoing, in his own interests, they should not have posted him to that team. I think that there is something that some of us don't understand, because you don't just mention him alone, his name, in a paper indicting him, and almost immediately sending him to head an elite team. And his name is, everywhere. Soldiers are not supposed to be treated that way. Allow him, maybe you can give him some backroom work to be doing. When his name is cleared, wherever, even if you want him to be the CDS, you can let him be the CDS. But at the moment, whilst his name, if I ask you, how much do you know about our current CDS? You would have a lot of positive things to say about the current CDS, but you hardly would have negative, so many negative things to say about him. He's human, there will be one or two.
Right.
And so mine is that as soldiers, these people, they revere their commanders. There are certain regimental structures they must always follow. So I think that whoever, sent him there, whoever reappointed him to go there, has done him a lot more damage than those of us who understand these things will tell you they should have waited for him to be prosecuted or whatever, or for them to say, well, he's exonerated. Then at least everyone and his own forces would know that, well, our boss, he didn't do anything wrong.
All right. Quick one on DSP Azugu. Interestingly, his name is mentioned by the City FM journalist, but in this statement from National Security, we don't see his name pop up. It's interesting because with the short commission's, report, we see their recommendations when it comes to DSP Azugu and how he is supposed to be moved from the position he was occupying. Unfortunately, we have his name come up here again. What do we do with that situation? Briefly.
There's a reason why I say there is some cover-up at the national security. They have to be speaking to us because at the moment, Ghanaians are not happy with the security situation in the country, especially looking at what national security is doing. First of all, DSP Azugu, there is a reason why I said there is something. DSP Azugu, his name was mentioned in the Emil Short Commission report. He himself was there during the brouhaha. He's supposed to, that wing of the national security, the operation should have been scrapped according to, the Emil Short Commission's report. But it hasn't been done. His name was mentioned as one of the people who led the team to beat Abuze, Caleb and the rest. Strangely enough, his name is once again missing. And so it's as if his name never came up. This is the reason why I think that the president, who happens to be the commander-in-chief of the Ghana Armed Forces and the chairman of the National Security Council, should put his foot down and scrap the operational wing of the national security. We need the national security. We need them in fighting crime, cross-border crime, to fight piracy. We need them, but not the current national security with the operational wing, because they have outlived their usefulness. They terrorize Ghanaians and they do all manner of things, and I think that in the 21st century, if we begin to play the ostrich, it's just a matter of time. It will be our turn. They lock you up, and my good friend, lawyer Adaudu, would come there to try and get bail for you, and he might spend a whole week and he won't get you. In 21st century Ghana, I think that we can do better than we are doing.
Okay, to wrap with you, Mr. Bona, of course, I've heard you talk about Lieutenant Colonel Agyemang and say that practically he's finished, when it comes to the military establishment, especially if these accusations are concerned, that he doesn't have the right or the temerity, or maybe I should say the authority to take command of another such regiment and all of that. By way of punitive measures, what would you proffer for anybody? And I'm not just singling out Lieutenant Colonel Agyemang, DSP Azugu, should any punitive measures be meted out to him, and maybe these three faceless officers who have been returned to the Ghana Police Service. What punitive measures do you feel will actually satisfy the generality of the people when it comes to what has happened?
Well, when you are dealing with the security services, it's usually very difficult because they have their own laid-down process. Everything is well spelled out. But I would have thought that, mentioning them by name, first of all, is punitive enough. But unfortunately, the police officers, their names haven't been mentioned. Colonel Agyemang, first of all, he has suffered the first most serious punitive measure, his name tattered, beaten. The second thing I would say should have been, if after the thorough investigation, because they are supposed to go back to their agency they came from to be for investigations to finish, even though I don't know how that would ever happen, would have been to say, well, if they are wrong, one of the things they do usually is to demote you. One of the things they do is that you stay at that rank for a while, because then if after 4 years you are supposed to move up rank, you stay there. They don't send you to a unit that you are going to be influential. And so I think these are punitive measures but as the national security said, if what they did according to the national security was criminal, because we all know that there is, there is an international convention against torture. If it is true that what they did amounted to some amount of brutality, then we just don't wishy-wash it to say that they should, by now, should have been facing police investigations. And if they found them probably, they found them liable for prosecution in court, they are taken to a civilian court and prosecuted according to law. If the civilian court lets them go, then one will say that, well, their names have been cleared. But at the moment, as we sit, it is free for all. And for me, I think that every day that the national security is not sanitized, all of us are at risk. It doesn't matter whether you are in government or you are in opposition, because there are a lot of people who are parading around purporting to be national security officers. And that is the most dangerous thing, because they could accost you and beat you up if they are not happy with you. And I think that that shouldn't be happening, under our human rights lawyer, human rights activist, lawyer, president. They shouldn't be happening under him. He shouldn't be superintending over such a mess. I believe that as is outside the country, when it comes, the Christians are talking, Muslims are talking, well-meaning Ghanaians are talking. We are all up in arms against the rot at national security. Let's get it sanitized as quickly as possible.
Adam Bonner, thank you very much for engaging with us this morning. Security analyst Adam Bonner there. We're grateful for your time. Let me come back into the studio. I know you'd have some reactions to some of what he has said, so I'll give you that bite, and then we can talk about, very briefly, the final bit, about sanitizing national security. And we'll take it from the angle of, look, let's face it, we've had party elements in our security apparatus. Depending on which party is in power, there will be accusations from the other major party. If the NDC is in power, the MPP will accuse it. How do we deal with that? I've heard a top official, say in recent times that, well, it's part of, are they barred from being part of national security? But national security is meant to be people of a certain elite level of thinking. They are trained in a certain way to fit a specific purpose for the country. So I'll start with you, Kalinzi.
Thank you for that. Let me come back, first of all, to the whole question of where we are and the comments made by Mr. Bonner and my fellow panelists here. I think we need to be careful. And I'm saying this and with a precursor that I started by saying that the alleged assault is unquestionably nothing we want in our society. Let's be clear on that. And clearly, the Minister of National Security has taken a very clear step for the first time, as I said, that I recall that has happened, and sent certain alleged people back to their original home, let's say. And the wording he used is very important. It's important for us to remember that, because I think sometimes we take that. First of all, Lieutenant Frank Agyeman, he says, report to the Chief of Defense Staff for further investigation and appropriate action. We don't know what investigation the Army is doing. We don't know if the Armed Forces Council have met. We've had no comment whatsoever from the Ghana Army about what's going on. So let's just be a little bit careful on our pronouncement, because the story is not finished. Because the letter that the minister wrote was very deliberate and very clear about where it is that action needs to be taken. It's clear. Further investigation and appropriate action.
I'll tell you, Mr. Kalinzi, why many people are skeptical about what further investigations will ensue. Because we've seen this time without number, barring this novelty of the ministry, the National Security Ministry, coming out to own up to some situation. We've had precedents where all of this, we've had commissions set up and nothing happened.
But the same thing we said about when the National Security said they were doing an investigation, nobody expected this letter to come out. But it did come out.
Okay.
And the point is that, and I started by saying is, how are we dealing with these problems as we're going forward? Are the institutions learning? Is the rule of law, because that's the only thing we can stand against at the end of the day, helping us? The second point I want to take is also on the police for further investigation and disciplinary action. That tells me there is a phase 2 to this we don't know yet. So let us be, I know that there's been no formal communication from the Ghana Army, none, or from the police. We also know that the Armed Forces Council have not met, and that is where any such decision will be taken. Those are facts. The police we haven't heard of. So what we should be now focusing on, for what I'm concerned is, we should be asking now the Ghana Armed Forces to give us a sense of what is happening, the police, what is happening. And also importantly...
So we should follow up.
We should follow, and importantly, NMC, National Media Commission's work, because at the end of the day, these are internal investigations. The NMC is there for this particular area to engage with. Now, I want to come back quickly about this issue of how we reform it, in terms of whether people...
When you say it, you're referring to national security.
Right. And this question about, well, there are party people there, so it's a bad thing. You know, the reality
is it a good thing?
Well, let me develop my point. There are party people of both sides in every institution in this country. Here, there are party people from both sides. Doesn't necessarily mean you know them. This is a fact of life. But we must get to a situation where it's not the individual that focuses the institution, but the institution. I believe it was President Obama that said we don't need big men and women. I didn't say women, he said big men, but we need effective institutions.
Right.
If we start talking about institutions, your questions about professionalism, appropriate competencies, a skill set become more of a discussion than if every time we talk about it, oh, MPP is there, NDC is there, CPP is there. We lose train of it. Our focus should be, are these institutions fit for purpose? Do we have the right people there? And then the discussion is enriched. But the minute we try and turn it into a them versus us, we lose, the rationale goes out of the window. We start discussing and people naturally will start becoming very heated, very defensive. So let's talk about, is the institution appropriate? I am not in a situation where I believe the national security is a failed cause. It can't be. It cannot be a failed cause, because without national security, colleagues, we will be in a very bad place as a country. So we can't say this is a failed institution. No, let's not go. We have challenges with that institution, and it's up to all of us to look at that, to engage with them.
Okay.
And it's very important we bear that in mind as we engage in that. Let us not conclude before we know what is happening. Issues about punitive action. The Ghana Armed Forces have their own processes. If we don't like it, we can have a discussion, but they have their processes and their punishment. The police have their own process and their punishment. Sometimes you can make an argument, yes, maybe they could have suspended them and done a discussion, but that's a discussion with the police or with the Ghana Armed Forces. But the fact of the matter is, the question we should be asking is, what is going on? What has happened to your investigation? The National Security Minister has sent them to you. What's happening? Okay. And before we have that, we should just temper our judgment a little bit before we do that. Once we have that, then we can all have a discussion on it.
Lawyer Dawudu, how do we sanitize the national security?
If I come there, I'll come quickly. But one lesson or two we should learn is that the power of the media. You know, when it happened, they said, yes, you can arrest and do it today, but we will continue every day in doing our work. So you see, they started reeling under pressure. And while citizens rose and were condemning what actually happened, that's resulted in what we have seen. So it tells you when citizens participate and they call a spade, this is what we see. I've always been telling my friends within the security agencies, I always say it's professionalism and competence. If I come to your institution and you tell me the law grants me 48 hours to arrest you and investigate. So when I come and you tell me this, why wouldn't I cooperate with you? And you say, look, within 30 minutes, if I finish with you, I'll let you go. But the overzealousness, you know, and everybody wants to show that I'm from national security, operatives. They are not professional. Professionalism.
I mean, ordinarily, people in such a setup wouldn't even want you to know that.
Wouldn't even want you to know that they are national security
intelligence officials ordinarily wouldn't be coming out letting you know I'm this or that.
I'm telling you, the first thing you can identify somebody from national security, he has a dark glasses, a bigger coat over him, he has some butter, and he says, I'm national security operative. But you see, that's where our best should be going. Because national security is about intelligence, it's about thinking, deep thinking. And that's not to say that we don't have fine gentlemen within the national security. I think it's the way we train and we bring them in. We are not giving that kind of training, the adequate training. And, you know, it's like when they go and terrorize, some superiors are happy. They go and terrorize him. So we have all these people, right? The level of education may not be up to scratch. They go, they terrorize people. See what happened to this UOP, the Ashanti Regional
Coordinator.
Ahenso Opariado. Listen, it was just a matter that, listen, a letter, we are not renewing your contract, move out of the office. It doesn't need people who have not even been to come and handcuff a former police commander. He was handcuffed. It all tells you that it was professionalism. You tell him, you know what, the law gives us power. You have to move out of office. If you don't move, we'll move you with force.
So at least...
So for me, it is about the training and the mindset that we will terrorize people when they hear that we are from national security. I always say, look, they think that with the uniform, maybe the army uniform, the police, it will intimidate you. And they use that to intimidate you with blazing guns. I think that we need to look at how they are trained.
Okay.